I never imagined that my own son would be capable of pushing me to the floor. Not in anger, not in some heated argument, but in the middle of Christmas Eve dinner, and in front of our entire family. All for one reason: so his father-in-law could take the head of the table, a seat that had belonged to me, unchallenged, for more than 30 years. What Logan didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the moment my back hit that cold hardwood floor, something inside me broke. Not cracked, not bruised, broke, and that same night, I made a decision that would change the course of his life. When Logan woke up the next morning, he didn't hear Christmas bells, or the soft hum of a holiday morning the way he used to as a child. He woke up to consequences, bank alerts, blocked accounts, withdrawn guarantees, corporate inquiries, calls that would have made any man tremble if he truly understood what they meant. Because consequences don't always arrive with threats. Sometimes they arrive when a man feels the safest, when he believes the storm has passed. Before we go further, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We share real-life stories every single day. And let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Albert Winslow, and I'm 67 years old. I spent my entire life in construction, building a company from a rented garage into a business with hundreds of employees. I lost my wife, Elaine, 4 years ago. Since then, my son, Logan Stratford, became the most important thing I had left in this world. Or at least, I believed he was. Until the night of the 24th of December 2024. That was the night. Everything I thought I understood about family, fractured right in front of me, under the hand of the man I raised. And if you think the push was the worst part, you have no idea what was coming. So let's go back. Back to the beginning. Back to December 24th. A day that looked peaceful on the outside, but was already rotting from within. Christmas Eve, 5 p.m. Suburban Chicago. The sun had already slipped behind the winding, snow-covered streets when I arrived at Logan's house. There's something about Christmas Eve air. That faint mixture of cold snow, chimney smoke, and distant church bells, something that makes even a tired man feel a hint of warmth. I pulled my collar up, pressed my palm against the red brick wall beside the door, and let out a long breath I didn't fully understand. A tension sat in my chest tight, thin, stretched like a wire about to snap. A father's intuition. And at 67, I've learned that a father's intuition, especially on Christmas Eve, rarely misses. The door opened before I finished my second knock. "Grandpa." Noah launched himself into me, hugging hard enough to make me step back. I laughed and wrapped my arms around him, and for a moment, the cold inside my chest thawed. "You've grown again," I told him. "Half an inch and I'm taller than Dad." I stepped into the house warm, cinnamon-scented, glowing with Christmas lights strung around the railing. Everything looked exactly like a perfect American Christmas Eve. But the first thing that felt wrong was Martha. She stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of sauce. But her eyes were not on the food. They flicked toward Logan, who had just stepped out of the dining room. That look, sharp, precise, calculating. When I greeted her, she gave me a thin smile, a smile that never reached her eyes. "Hi, Dad, you're early." "I'm always early on Christmas," I said gently. As I turned to hang up my coat, I heard her whisper softly, not loud enough to be disrespectful, but firm enough to be a command. "Remind him about it." "About what?" I pretended I didn't hear, but I filed it away. The second wrong thing. Noah tugged my hand toward the dining room. But the moment I stepped inside, it hit me like a cold wind. The head chair, my chair, had been quietly shifted aside. Not removed, not hidden, just displaced, replaced. Logan stood nearby, hands in his pockets, wearing a smile so uneasy it nearly fell off his face. "Dad." He approached slowly. "Tonight, can you sit over there? It's just more appropriate." More appropriate. For whom? I looked at the chair he pointed toward. A regular seat. Not mine. Not the father's place. Not the place I had occupied for 4 decades of holidays, arguments, reconciliations, and toasts. I didn't raise my voice. I just rested my hand on the wooden back of the displaced chair, feeling the cold of it seep through my sleeve. Is there a reason for this, Logan? My voice was calm. Too calm. Logan swallowed. I watched him try to speak, try to confess something, but then Martha glanced from the kitchen. Just one look. A warning. A reminder. And whatever truth Logan was about to say died in his throat. Then came the first mini-climax of the night. As Logan set down a stack of plates, a folded sheet of paper slipped out from under a napkin. I bent to pick it up. Just the headline was enough to stop my breath. Strategic Transition Proposal. Stratford Construction. And under it, the name Reginald Draper. His father-in-law. A man who treated the construction industry like a dusty antique to strip apart and resell. I looked up. What is this? I asked. Logan stepped forward. Dad, it's nothing. Just some ideas. Future planning. Whose future? I cut him off quietly. The future of the company I built with these two hands. Or the future of that head chair. Silence. The pot in the kitchen continued to crackle. Noah watched us with wide, confused eyes. I placed the paper back on the table. I didn't need to read another line. I understood enough. Storms don't always announce themselves with thunder. Sometimes they arrive through small things. A chair moved 2 feet to the left. A look exchanged between spouses. A document printed at the wrong time. And I could feel it, the storm already forming around me. Noah tugged my sleeve. Grandpa, Dad's just stressed. It'll be okay. I smiled and stroked his hair. It's all right, Noah. I'm just realizing a few things. And I was. But none of them were good. Dinner hadn't even begun. Yet a coldness had already settled deep into my bones. A coldness that told me nothing would be the same after tonight. But I had no idea that the push that would put me on the floor, the moment that would change everything, was only minutes away. The chair, and the push that changed everything. I sat down in the chair Logan pointed to, but nothing about it felt like any Christmas I had ever known. The seat was harder, the position wrong, the air around me shifted. It felt as if someone had quietly moved me out of the center of my own family. Not loudly, not rudely, just deliberately. Noah sat beside me, cheerful and innocent, sweetly unaware of the cold machinery turning just behind the warmth of the Christmas lights. Martha moved silently around the table, setting each plate with the precision of someone trying to hide a truth she hoped no one would notice. And Logan, he pretended to be calm, but his hands betrayed him. Restless, tense, unsure where to go. Then came the knock. 3 sharp taps on the front door. I didn't need to ask who it was. Reginald Draper, my son's father-in-law. The kind of East Coast businessman who believed the world belonged to men like him. Men who bought influence the way others bought bread. Logan hurried to open the door. I heard Reginald's voice float in from the entryway. Merry Christmas, Logan. I hope I'm not too late. No. Men like him are never late. They arrive exactly when their presence will make the greatest impact. The door opened wider, and Reginald stepped into the dining room as if it were a stage set just for him. Long black coat, charcoal scarf, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. He scanned the room the way seasoned men scan a negotiation table, reading people by the way they inhale. Albert. He nodded at me. Not a bow. Not a smile. Just a nod you give a rival, not a family member. Reginald, I replied, my voice flat and steady like the surface of a lake moments before it freezes. His gaze drifted to the head of the table, then to Logan. A silence signal. Logan understood immediately. He walked toward the head chair, moved behind me, placed his hand on the back of the seat, not the one I was sitting in, but the empty chair at the head of the table, and he pulled it out, clearly, inviting Reginald to sit. I looked at my son. He did not meet my eyes. He looked at his father-in-law. Admiration? Fear? Or a desperate need to please? The oxygen in the room thinned. Only the popping of oil in Martha's pan could be heard from the kitchen. Logan, I said, my voice calm but edged. Why didn't you leave that chair where it has always belonged? He swallowed hard. His eyes flickered fear. Then something harder. Dad, tonight is special. You can sit over there. This seat is for my father-in-law. I held his gaze. You're moving my place in your home. For him? Silence. Reginald didn't speak. He unbuttoned his coat, brushed snow from his sleeve, and simply waited for Logan to answer. Logan inhaled, exhaled, and said quietly, but with a clarity that sliced clean through the room, "This seat is for my father-in-law. Dad, please get up." Noah's head snapped toward his father as if he had just heard something impossible. I stayed seated. I leaned back slightly, eyes steady on Logan. "No," I said softly. "You know I won't." Martha's eyes flashed annoyance, fear, something mixed. Reginald remained expressionless. Stone. Ice. "Logan," I said again, "do you know what you're doing?" His jaw tightened. 1 second. 2 seconds. And then he snapped. "Stand. Up." "Dad." I did not stand. He stepped toward me. Too close. So close that I felt his breath in the air between us, sharp with adrenaline. "Son," I whispered, "don't do something you cannot take back." But those words no longer reached him. And then, in a moment that will echo in my memory until the day I leave this world, Logan placed his hand on my shoulder and pushed. Hard. My balance broke. The chair slid. My back hit the edge of the table, and my knees struck the wooden floor with a sound so sharp it hollowed the room. I heard Noah scream, "Dad, what are you doing?" I heard Martha cry out, "Logan, stop." I heard glasses rattle, plates tremble, and through it all, I heard the silence of Reginald Draper, a silence that frightened me more than the push. I stayed on the ground for a moment. No one rushed to me. No one but Noah. He threw himself down, grabbing my arm with trembling hands. "Grandpa, Grandpa, are you okay?" I put my hand over his. "I'm all right, son, I'm all right." But inside, I wasn't. I rose slowly, on my own, without Logan, without help. I looked directly into my son's eyes. "You've done something tonight that no son should ever do to his father, especially on Christmas Eve." Logan stood there, chest heaving, shame and anger chasing each other across his face. I turned to Reginald. He stared at me, unblinking, unmoved, like a man watching a scene he'd seen many times before. "I believe," I said quietly, "this is your seat." Reginald walked forward, unhurried, composed, and lowered himself into the chair, like a king returning to a throne. Not a word of apology, not a word of gratitude. Just the quiet, chilling entitlement of a man who expected the world to rearrange itself for him. Logan pulled the chair in for him, careful and obedient, less like a son, more like a subordinate. I looked at Logan one last time. What I saw in his eyes was not hatred, not defiance, but weakness. A man who'd lost his spine and filled the space with someone else's will. And then I saw Martha, confused, afraid, staring at her husband as if he had turned into a stranger. Dinner began, but no one touched their food. I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking. They weren't angry. They weren't hurting. They were empty. Completely, chillingly empty. And then came the twist. Martha's phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up, just for a second, and the screen faced the window. I recognized what I saw instantly. A video, sent through the neighborhood group chat. I saw the driveway. I saw Logan and Martha arguing earlier that afternoon, outside in clear view. Someone had filmed it. Just a few seconds, but enough to tell me tonight's disaster was only the visible tip. Some families break silently. Mine did not. Mine broke with a shove. I stood, adjusted my coat, and said only one thing before heading toward the door. "I will never forget tonight." Noah grabbed my hand, eyes wet. "Grandpa, please don't go." I touched his cheek. "I'm just stepping outside, son, it's all right." But everyone in that room, Logan, Martha, Reginald, and myself, knew the truth. The door Logan opened tonight with that push would never close the way it used to. I stepped into the downstairs bathroom and closed the door behind me. Not locked, just shut enough to place a thin wall between myself and the clatter of silverware outside, and Reginald's cold star, and Noah's trembling breath and my son's ragged, guilty exhale. The warm light hit the mirror and reflected a face I barely recognized. My cheek was flushed from the fall. My knee throbbed, not just from the impact, but from age, from history. But my eyes were calm, and that terrified me more than anything. Not the anger, not the humiliation, not even the pain, but the calm, because a man only becomes this calm when he has passed the final threshold of tolerance, when something inside him has stopped bending and started breaking, and I had broken. I placed both palms on the sink, letting the cold water run over my wrists, a sharp, numbing sting that steadied me instead of soothing me. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply stood there and calculated, because when a father is pushed to the floor of his son's home, that is not a moment of disrespect. It is a declaration of war. I pulled out my phone. 32% battery left. Enough. I tapped the first name I needed. David Corman, my attorney for 22 years. A man of few words, fewer emotions, but flawless in execution. He answered after 2 rings. Albert, if you're calling on Christmas Eve, it's not for something small. I inhaled slowly, still staring into the mirror at the face of a man who loved his son, and had finally been pushed past love's last limit. I need you to prepare documents to remove Logan from all executive authority at Stratford Construction. No gasp. No morale lecture. Just 3 seconds of professional silence. Albert, David said, are you certain? This is not an action you can walk back easily. I'm certain. What happened? I glanced at the red mark blooming on my shoulder where Logan's hand had shoved me. He pushed me to the floor, in front of my grandson, in front of everyone. David didn't speak for a long moment. Then, we'll proceed under the Emergency Executive Reassignment Clause. Logan may run operations, but you still control the majority shares. I want it triggered within 24 hours. I'll draft everything tonight. I nodded. One more thing, I added. Yes? I want a full audit of every account, card, and expense Logan has touched in the last 6 months. Internalo di. Immediate. A low exhale came through the phone. The kind people let out when they know a family storm has turned into a legal hurricane. I'll contact CFO Hart. I hung up. Next name. Amelia Hart. Our CFO. Brilliant. Précis. Emotionless in all the right ways. She picked up immediately. Mr. Winslow. Merry Christ. No pleasantries, Amelia. I need an urgent request handled. Her voice shifted instantly into business mode. Yes, sir. I want a full audit of all accounts Logan used in the past 6 months. Corporate card, representation, expenses, project budgets, cash, advances, everything. Understood. Priority level? Absolute priority. Begin tonight. I'll need full authorization from you. You'll have it in 10 minutes. A pause. Then, may I ask what prompted this? I pressed my fingers into the forming bruise on my shoulder. Family. She said nothing more. Amelia never asks questions she doesn't need to ask. She finds answers in numbers. I continued to stand there in that cramped bathroom, but the room felt too small for the weight of what was moving inside me. One more call. Franklin Kellner, the interim CEO before Logan, a man of steady loyalty and old-fashioned principles. He answered after an unusually long ring, breathing hard, probably just in from the snow. Albert? Something wrong? Franklin, I need you to prepare everything necessary to resume control from Logan. A long, stunned silence. My God, you're serious. I've never been more serious. What did he do? I looked down at my hands, the same hands that once held my son when he was small, and now bore the sting of his betrayal. Enough to lose everything. Franklin exhaled heavily. I'll arrange an emergency board meeting for the morning of the 26th. But Albert, this will shake the entire company. I'm aware. Do you want HR pre-briefed for confidentiality? Yes. No one outside you and David. You have my support, Franklin said. I know you. If you've decided this, you have your reasons. I hung up. For a long moment, I simply stood silent, listening to the muffled sounds outside the bathroom. Reginald asking Logan when dinner would begin. Martha trying and failing to steady her voice. Noah hovering near the door, wondering if he should knock again. All of them circling around the wreckage of the night. While inside me, something colder than grief settled into place. A quiet so absolute that nothing could disturb its surface. I rolled up my sleeve. Dark bruising was spreading slowly along my shoulder. A perfect reminder. Good, I whispered. I'll remember the feeling. I looked into the mirror again, and for the first time in years, I saw him, the man who had built a company from a garage, who had buried a wife with dignity, who had raised a son alone, who had survived more winters than most men could count. My eyes no longer looked wounded, no longer tired, no longer pleading. They were sharp, focused, cold, the eyes of a man ready to reclaim what was his. Outside the door, I heard Noah's small voice hesitate. "Grandpa, are you okay?" I opened the door, knelt to him, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm all right, Noah. I'm just thinking, maybe the grown-ups in your house need to relearn some manners." He didn't understand, but he nodded anyway and squeezed my hand. I straightened, walked past Logan without looking at him, and with a voice low enough to chill the room, I said, "My son taught me something tonight." I paused in the center of the dining room, turned my head just slightly enough to catch both Logan and Reginald in my peripheral vision. Now, it's my turn to teach him. I left Logan's house that night without a single pair of eyes meeting mine. Maybe they were ashamed. Maybe they were afraid. Or maybe they all understood that what had happened wasn't going to be smoothed over with an apology and a warm holiday toast. The snow outside was ankle-deep, the wind slicing across my face like a cold blade. And yet I felt a strange, steady peace. The peace of a man who has just stepped out of a suffocating room, or the peace of a man standing before a storm he fully intends to command. I barely slept that night. I sat in my small home office surrounded by old blueprint tubes, photos of Elaine, and the wooden chair she picked for me back in 1994. And I waited. Waited for dawn. Waited for clarity. Waited for the moment I would stop being a father wounded and start being a man who protects what he built. And at 5 a.m., Christmas morning, I began. No ceremony. No presents. No tree waiting to be lit. Just a 6-7 year old man with a bruised shoulder where his son shoved him, making decisions that would change the course of the Stratford family forever. 6:10 a.m. Email from CFO Amelia. Subject line: Initial irregularities found requesting authorization. Amelia had worked through the night, and she was the type of woman who never let sentiment cloud numbers. I opened the report. 3 recent corporate expenses under Logan's authorization. $3,200 business dinner at an upscale restaurant. New client present. $1,900 luxury SUV rental for partner transport. No partner listed. $2,700. Internal marketing costs. No documentation provided. Not catastrophic amounts, but enough to trigger compliance. Enough to activate Section 14, the executive misconduct review process. Could Logan defend these? Possibly, but he wouldn't escape scrutiny, and he had no idea I had pulled the string the night he pushed me. 7:40 a.m. Message from my attorney, David. Albert, I've completed the draft to temporarily remove Logan under the emergency reassignment clause. PDF attached for your signature. Board meeting set for 12/26 at 9 a.m. I signed without hesitation. My name appeared crisp and sharp on the screen, as cold as the snow falling last night. At that moment, Logan's position stopped being secure. 8:55 a.m. call from the bank. Mr. Winslow? We need to confirm your request to withdraw as guarantor on Mr. Logan Stratford's mortgage. In America, business is never personal. It is simply procedure. Yes, I said. Withdraw immediately. A brief statement for our records? I no longer assume responsibility for that loan. That was enough. Logan had used my guarantor status to buy the house. Upgrade it. Borrow more. and take financial risks he never would have dared without my name. 9 a.m. He received the alert. Guarantor withdrawal executed. Mortgage status high. Risk review. I didn't need to see his reaction. I knew it intimately. A man who has lived under the shelter of someone else's name cannot handle the first cold gust of independence. 10:30 a.m. The first message from Logan. Dad, do you know anything about the mortgage? The bank must be wrong. I did not reply. For the first time in his 40 years of life, I ignored my son's message, not out of cruelty, but because silence sometimes teaches where speeches fail. 12 p.m. Logan's corporate card is frozen. Amelia's second email arrived. Per your instruction, Logan's corporate card has been locked. Compliance notified. The automated system sent Logan a message. Your corporate spending privileges have been suspended pending review. I could imagine him staring at that notification, his eyes widening, the vein in his temple pulsing, turning to Martha with an explanation thinner than tissue paper. And still, it wasn't over. 12:18 p.m. Logan calls. I don't answer. 12:20 p.m. He calls again. I don't answer. 12:23 p.m. Third call. I mute the phone. I am not the kind of man who uses silence as punishment. But tonight, silence was the only language he deserved. If he could push his father to the floor in his own home, he could stand on his own legs while the world tilted under him. 2 p.m. email from compliance. We are initiating an internal review regarding Mr. Logan Stratford. Please provide access to all relevant documents. I forwarded it to Amelia and David. In my company, compliance is not a friendly department. They are trained to do one thing: find truth. No matter which executive loses a title in the process. I placed my phone on the desk. My office glowed faintly with winter light through frosted windows. Outside, snow fell heavy and soft, quiet enough to bury yesterday's chaos. But clarity inside me had never been sharper. 3 p.m. A knock at my front door. I expected a delivery, but when I opened it, there stood Mr. Clarkson, Logan's neighbor, bundled in a thick coat, holding his phone awkwardly. Albert, I wasn't sure if I should show you this, he murmured. But you deserve to know. You're a good father. What is it? I asked. He turned his phone toward me. A security camera video. Timestamp. December 24th, late afternoon. Just hours before the Christmas dinner. Logan and Martha in the driveway. Arguing. Not a small disagreement. A heated one. Logan's posture was tight, his movements sharp. He swung his arm in frustration, then kicked a wooden Christmas sign hard enough to knock it over. Martha flinched. Everything was silent. His camera had no audio from that distance. But I didn't need sound. I knew exactly what I was looking at. I thought you should have it, Clarkson said, voice low. In case things get worse. I simply nodded. Thank you. This means more than you know. He walked away, snow crunching under his boots. I watched the video again and saved it. Filed neatly. Not to humiliate Logan, not to accuse him, but because a man who loses control like that cannot be trusted with a company or a family, and he had lost control twice within 24 hours. Inside, I opened an old Excel file, something Elaine and I made years ago, a list of leadership red flags for future executives. The first line read, "A leader must correct himself before power corrects him." She wrote that. I closed my eyes and let the memory sting without destroying me. I was protecting what she and I built. Our company, our name, and the dignity our son once had. I checked my phone again. Logan's messages filled the screen. Dad, what's happening? Please call me. I need to understand the mortgage. My card is frozen. Did you do this? Dad, answer me. Dad, what are you doing? I turned off the screen. Another door quietly closed. I stepped outside on my front porch. Evening had fallen. Christmas lights glowed across North Avenue, little warm pearls reflecting on layers of untouched snow. Families were gathering by fireplaces, passing plates, opening gifts, whispering holiday wishes. And I stood alone on my porch, hands in my pockets, breathing in the cold night air. But I did not feel lonely. I felt grounded, because I knew a grown man must face the consequences of his own choices, and I was finally letting Logan face his. When I returned to my office, I looked at the documents, the emails, the video, the notifications, and I spoke a single sentence into the quiet room. What happened last night will not disappear into the snow. I sat down, folded my hands, and said the second line. Not bitter, not vengeful, just true. This storm isn't here to destroy. It's here to teach. And I prepared for December 26th, the day my son's life would turn in a direction he would never forget. Christmas morning, the 25th of December 2024. 30-plus years of being a father taught me one truth. A man can hide his collapse at night, but morning exposes everything. And that Christmas morning, my son Logan Stratford did not wake up to the smell of coffee or the glow of holiday lights. He woke up to his wife's panicked scream, "Logan, come downstairs now." I wasn't there, but I knew exactly what was unfolding moment by moment, because I had set part of this storm in motion, not to punish him, but to force him to finally stand in the life he created. This Christmas held no gifts, only awakening. While I was pouring myself a cup of coffee in my quiet kitchen, Logan was standing in his living room in Northbrook, hands shaking. Martha held her phone up, her face drained of color. "Logan, the bank says the guarantor pulled out. Do you understand what that means? We could lose the house." I didn't hear the sentence, but I know how every word must have landed on him. Guarantor withdrawal executed. That line was not an accident. I had signed the removal hours before sunrise, while the snow outside was still settling into its first soft layer. A year earlier, I never would have imagined taking such a step against my own son. But when he shoved me to the floor on Christmas Eve, I understood something. He had crossed a line no man should cross. And lines like that must be taught with consequences. 8:15 a.m. I knew he would call the bank. And he did. The staff polite, as always, told him, "Only the guarantor can change the status, Mr. Stratford." I pictured him in the living room, fingers white around his phone, realizing for the first time in his life that no one was coming to rescue him. Not his father, not his father-in-law, not the company, just him, standing alone with the fallout of his choices. 8:40 a.m. Then came the second blow. His laptop flashed. Access denied. Account under administrative review. I had asked Amelia, our CFO, to lock his email, project permissions, and corporate card at 5 a.m. sharp. Not because I wanted him to break, but because if we waited even an hour, the questionable transactions she found might vanish, deleted, edited, or disguised. A CEO who panics is dangerous. And I knew Martha was asking him, "Logan, what's happening now?" He had no answer. A man can lie to the world, but he cannot lie when the truth tightens around his throat. 9:45 a.m. Reginald entered the story. The call went exactly as he later repeated to me. "Are you going to help me? We're going to lose the house." Logan Bagel. Reginald's answer was curt, clean, and merciless. "I don't rescue a man who pushes his father to the ground in front of his own family." I stood completely still in my kitchen as he said this to me later. Not proud, not vindictive, just quiet, because finally, Logan was facing something I couldn't teach him. A man who dishonors his father will eventually dishonor everyone around him. And the world does not forgive that kind of man. Martha was breaking, and Noah was scared. Around 11 a.m., Martha began packing a bag. "I'm going to my father's." "Logan, what did you do? What are you hiding from me?" Logan said nothing, because he didn't know which truth to tell and which lie he still believed. At the staircase, Noah looked down at him, voice small. "Dad, what's going on?" And I pictured Logan staring up at his son and seeing, maybe for the first time, fear in that boy's eyes. I spent my life protecting Noah, but that morning, I let Logan face his own child's fear. Not because I didn't love him, because loving him too long, too blindly, had helped create the man he had become. 12 p.m. His corporate card was declined at a cafe. I knew this because the system sent me the mirrored alert. None of these actions were taken for revenge. Each one was a mirror Logan had avoided for years. Honor, the thing he thought nobody could touch, was peeling away from him piece by piece. 1:15 p.m. My phone rang. Logan. I stared at the name on the screen. I inhaled slowly. He let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't silence it, but I did not answer. Not from anger, not from hatred, but because. Last night he pushed me to the floor. This morning I did not push back. I simply stepped aside and let him fall on his own. If he wanted to rise, he would have to choose to. 2 p.m. Compliance sent the next email. We request documentation for expenses under your authorization. I knew what that email would do. I knew Martha would see it. And she would ask, Logan, what did you spend on the corporate card? Silence. And silence in marriage is the most revealing answer. She took Noah's hand. She walked out. Logan wanted to follow, but he didn't. A man only begins to change after he loses the thing he thought would never leave him. 3:30 p.m. A journalist emailed him, requesting comment for a piece about internal misconduct. Logan threw his phone into the snow. I can picture him, on his knees in the driveway where I used to park when visiting Noah, hands clutching his hair, breath shaking, as everything from last night roared back through his mind. My silence, his shove, Noah's terrified eyes. And in that moment, my son finally understood. Mistakes happen. We all make them. But shoving your father to the floor on Christmas Eve, that is not a mistake. That is a boundary. And he crossed it. I stood by my living room window, watching snow coat the world like a clean sheet of paper. I listened to the wind whisper across the siding, branches tapping lightly at the eaves, and I imagined Logan whispering into the cold, Dad, I know what you did, and I deserve it. But what Logan could not yet see was this. This was only day one. The real lesson, the one that would save or destroy him, hadn't even begun. Christmas afternoon, the 25th of December 2024. I sat alone in my old kitchen, the yellow light pooling softly over a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Behind me was the wooden chair where Logan once sat as a 7-year-old, asking me to teach him how to tie his shoes. He grew up, became a man, became a CEO, became someone people admired. And last night, he used those hands, the hands I taught to tie a knot, to push me to the floor. But today, I wasn't the one falling. Today, Logan would fall, not because I pushed him, but because he finally had to face what he'd been running from his entire life. Consequences. Martha leaves and Logan tastes emptiness for the first time. I wasn't in that Northbrook house when it happened, but I knew every detail, because Martha called me an hour before she packed her suitcase. Albert, I can't let Noah stay in that house for one more day. Her voice shook, but it did not waver. On the phone I could hear everything, clothes being stuffed into a suitcase, the rustle of nylon, Noah's small footsteps coming downstairs. And then I heard Martha tell Logan, you pushed your father onto the floor. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was character. I froze in my kitchen. I had said those words inside my mind 1,000 times, but never imagined Martha would be the one forced to speak them aloud. I pictured Logan standing there, the same man who once believed he was untouchable, now crumbling piece by piece, not even knowing where to start picking up the fragments. And I knew this was the first moment he realized. He was not the center of the universe. The separation papers and the signature I knew would come, Dort, Kirk PM. A message from Martha. He signed. I didn't need to see the document. I knew Logan would sign without reading, because all his life, he signed everything with the same assumption. My father will fix the rest, but for the first time in his life, I let that signature decide his fate, not mine. When Martha walked out of that house, carrying Noah, and carrying her hurt, I could feel something inside Logan break. Not because he lost his wife, not because he lost his son, but because, for the first time, someone walked away from him who wasn't me, and he couldn't handle it. 6 p.m. Logan packs his own things. Martha later told me he stood in the living room a long time, his hand resting on the clock I bought him for his 18th birthday, a gift he'd thrown into a drawer for over a decade. Hearing that made my chest tighten. The 18-year-old boy I once knew was now a grown man standing among the ruins he created, and all he had left was $350. Just as I'd once told him when he was young, you'll never understand the value of a dollar until you need it to survive. Today, he understood. 7:42 p.m., the motel. Another text from Martha. He's at a model kusi. Noah won't let me tell you which one. I set my coffee down. Outside, snowflakes drifted like tiny needles in the wind. I know those rooms. Dim lights, creaking beds, bleach in the air, draft slipping under the door. And I knew my son was sitting on that bed, head in his hands, feeling small for the first time in his life. Christmas night, a night meant for families to gather. And Logan was eating cup noodles in a $69 motel room. No father, no wife, no son, and I had to allow it, because if I saved him now, I would lose him forever. The next morning, HR calls me, "Mr. Winslow, Logan just arrived." I didn't go to the office. I didn't want to stand there, watching employees stare at my son, the way people stare at a man stripped of everything. But I heard the full report. When HR told him, "You are removed from the CEO position, effective immediately," I could feel the collapse inside him like a mirror shattering. Logan always believed that chair belonged to him by blood, that he deserved it. But today, he learned adulthood's harshest lesson. No one deserves power, simply because they want it. By noon, a cardboard box. Security escorted him to the storage room to collect his belongings. One box. That's all. A career can fit into a single box, when it ends fast enough. I pictured Logan holding that box, hands trembling, not from the cold, but from shame. The kind of shame that makes a man's knees go weak, but still forces him to stand straight, so nobody sees him break. By early afternoon, 12 rejections. Martha sent me screenshots, one after another. "We've chosen another candidate. Not the right fit. We appreciate your interest. Truth is, this industry does not hire a CEO who loses his position over Christmas." And Logan finally understood. No one is obligated to forgive you. Late afternoon, a friend offers him a job. Not the job he wanted. The job he needed. Night shift, his friend said. Custodial. Willis Tower. I heard all this, but I didn't interfere. He had to tie his own shoes again, the way he did when he was small. 9:45 p.m. Logan put on a blue uniform, picked up a mop, and stepped into the employee elevator. No more VIP access. No glass-walled boardrooms. No CEO chair. Just a man wiping down the granite floors, where he once signed million-dollar contracts. And for the first time, I felt he was finally walking on his own legs. Painfully. Slowly. Kolomsili. But honestly, 3 a.m. the moment I knew he hit bottom. Logan stepped out of Willis Tower, stood in the falling snow, and stared up at the Chicago sky. Martha told me he stood there a long time, as if talking to someone who wasn't there. I know he was talking to me. "Dad, I get it now, and maybe I deserve it." I closed my eyes when I heard that, not out of relief, out of pain, but also because, when a man finally sees the bottom, that's when he can begin to climb. That night, I placed my hand on the table, the same table where Logan once did his homework, and whispered, "Son, this isn't the end. This is only the first chapter of you becoming a real man." The 27th of December, 2024, 3 in the morning. I woke to the sound of wind slamming against the window, and to one image that wouldn't leave my mind. My son Logan wiping the floors on the 58th story of Willis Tower. I hadn't seen him do it with my own eyes. But I knew. I knew because I had signed the papers that left him with no other path but to start over from the very bottom. I knew the Chicago wind at night harsh enough to cut through bone. I knew those empty office hallways where you could hear your own heartbeat. And I knew Logan had never once faced that kind of silence in his life. All his life, I watched him wear cashmere, polished Oxford shoes, texting assistants to rearrange his schedule. Now he was bending down, kneeling, scrubbing other people's footprints off granite floors. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vengeance. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt something rarer. This was the first time my son had ever touched the real ground. Willis Tower at night. A world he never knew. There are no board meetings there. No admiration. No polished CEO title shining on a desk. There is only the yellow glow of overnight lights, the hiss of wind at the windows, and the quiet endurance of men who work with their hands. It was the world I came from, the world Logan avoided his entire life. Miguel, a Guatemalan janitor I've never met, told Logan a story that night around 1 a.m. Martha sent me the audio the next day. I listened to every second. Miguel said, "There's an old man who clears the snow in my neighborhood every winter. He doesn't live there, just drives over. Clears the sidewalks for everyone. We call him Santa Claus." Logan asked, "What does he look like?" Miguel answered, "Tall. White hair. Gray scarf. Quiet. But kind." And I heard Logan fall silent on the recording. He knew exactly who that man was. Me. I cleared snow for strangers. But I didn't go back to clear the shattered pieces in my son's life. Not because of bitterness. Not because of pride. But because some lessons only work when they are taught in silence. Miguel continued, "Not everyone gets a father like that. If I had one, I'd call him every day." I replayed that part 3 times. And each time, my chest tightened as if someone reached in and squeezed it. Logan didn't respond. I knew why. He had called me, and the only thing he heard was a recorded legal message, the one I authorized the night he pushed me, 2:45 a.m. Logan asks the question every man fears. One of the night shift workers told him, "Life flips fast. I lost everything once too." I pictured Logan sitting on an old metal chair, exhausted, shoulders slumped in a way they never had when he stood behind a mahogany desk. Then he asked, "Do you ever feel like you deserve what happened to you?" How I wanted to answer that. How I wanted to be there to tell him, if you're still asking that question, you're not lost. The men who truly deserve it never ask. But I wasn't there. Wyatt, that worker, answered instead. And it was almost the same advice I would have given. And for the first time in months, I felt Logan finally looking into a mirror he had avoided for years. 4:10 a.m. The call that never reached me. My phone buzzed. The system flashed. A legally restricted number attempted to call. I had requested that block the night of the shove, not to punish him, not to avoid him, but because if I heard his voice before he hit bottom, I knew I'd save him too soon. And if I saved him early, he would never grow. He tried texting, "Dad, please, just talk to me once." The message never delivered. The system stopped it cold. Legal. Clean. Impersonal. Necessary. I pictured Logan sitting on the concrete stairs of the emergency exit, shivering, holding his head in both hands, whispering, "I'm sorry, Dad." I heard that apology as if he whispered it right beside me, but I stayed silent. Every lesson worth learning hurts. Morning. I watch him from a distance. I clear snow near Willis Tower each morning. Old habits. Old bones. So I knew he'd be at the station. I didn't stand near him. I didn't reveal myself. I only watched from a distance, as he shook in the wind, as he clutched the collar of a worn coat he would never have worn before, as he noticed the tear along the sleeve. That tear hurt me more than anything he said on Christmas Eve. Not because of the coat, but because it was the first time he looked like a man who finally understood poverty, reality, humility. He sat on the cold bench, eyes sunken, face aged 10 years in 3 days. And I whispered, "Son, you're only 10% through this lesson." Noah, the only one I truly watched closely. I didn't track Logan, but I watched Noah. Not because Noah needed protecting, but because I needed to know whether my grandson was standing in the right place, while the storm reshaped his father. When Noah slipped out of Martha's house and went to see Logan at the Motel 6, I was in my car, one parking lot away, not intervening, not interrupting, just watching. I saw Noah walk down that narrow motel hallway, his little hands tucked under his sleeves, backpack sliding off one shoulder. Later, Martha sent me the audio. Noah had told her everything. He had asked Logan, "Are you ashamed?" Logan must have frozen. Then Noah said the line that struck me deeper than anything Logan had done. "Grandpa clears snow for strangers." "But you hurt him." I turned my face away when I heard that. Not out of anger, because it was too true. Then Noah ended with, "I'm proud of you. Because you're trying." That was the moment Logan broke. Not from failure, but from finally being seen. Not as a CEO, not as a fallen man, but as a father who still had a chance. I watched from my car as father and son held each other. Noah wrapped his arms around Logan outside that motel room. Logan bent down, holding his son as if the world might shatter around them if he let go for even a second. I sat frozen in my car, hand gripping the steering wheel. For the first time since the Christmas shove, I didn't see Logan as a man who failed. I saw the boy he once was, crying after losing his first baseball game, asking me if losing meant he wasn't good enough. And I whispered, "Logan, you've started, but the road is still long." I started the car while Logan still watched Noah run down the stairs. He never saw me. If he had, the lesson would have snapped in half. I drove slowly, very slowly, until I turned onto the main road. And then I said softly, to no one but the cold air inside the car, "Keep going, son. Finish the lesson. Then we'll see if you deserve to stand tall again." The 30th of December 2024. Chicago had the kind of cold that didn't just sting the skin. It bent the air itself. Snow fell on the gray streets like a thin, deceitful blanket of peace over a city built on noise, urgency, and ambition. I sat at my cherrywood desk, the same desk Elaine picked out 30 years ago. A single lamp cast warm light over old folders, casting long shadows that looked like reminders of every responsibility I'd carried over a lifetime, and every heartbreak I still hadn't put down. When I opened my email, I saw a new message from Noah, and he had CC'd Logan. I froze for a moment, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Children only ask certain questions when they are hurt enough to force the words out. The email was only one line. "Grandpa, do you still see us as a family?" I leaned back in my chair, slowly. That question wasn't for Logan, not for Martha, not for Reginald. It was for me. I read it once, then again, a third time. Noah was 13, a child. He should not have been standing in the middle of a storm created entirely by adults who should have known better. I typed, "You're always family, Noah. Adults sometimes have to learn their lessons. That has nothing to do with a child." I deleted it, typed it again, deleted it again. In the end, I wrote the shortest version because the more words you give a child, the more weight you risk putting on their shoulders. Then I clicked send, not because I wanted to be distant, but because I knew that sharpness, clarity, was kinder than long explanations children shouldn't have to carry. I closed my eyes after sending the email. I didn't hate Logan. If I did, I wouldn't have stood on a freezing sidewalk 2 nights earlier, hidden behind a row of parked cars, watching him stumble out of his night shift, his clothes smelling of bleach, his shoes falling apart, his shoulders trembling from the cold. If I truly wanted to cut him off, I wouldn't have watched, unseen, when Noah ran into his arms outside that motel. I wouldn't have turned away before my presence ruined the moment. Some lessons a man has to walk through alone. 7:05 p.m. Noah walks through the snow. My phone buzzed. Noah had read my email. No reply. What I didn't know, not until later, was that he had quietly put on his coat, scarf, and hat, and slipped out of his grandfather's house into a night that was 10 degrees below zero. The distance to my home was only 10 minutes, but in that kind of cold, 10 minutes can feel like a lifetime. I was heating water for tea when I heard the knock. Soft, steady. When I opened the door, Noah stood there, red-cheeked, shivering, a 13-year-old boy trying his best not to fall apart. "Grandpa, I wanted to see you," he said, voice trembling from cold and fear. I didn't ask why he came, didn't scold him, didn't demand explanations. I simply rested my hand on his shoulder. Come in, Noah. I took off his coat, warmed a heat pack, tucked it into his hands, and poured him hot cocoa. He sat on the sofa holding the cup with both hands, eyes red. Sorry for coming without telling Mom. It's all right, I told him gently. Grandpa's house is always open for you. And that was all it took. Noah burst into tears. Grandpa, I'm scared our family won't go back together. Ever. I pulled him close. Noah, kids your age shouldn't be afraid of things like that. Grown-ups mess up. Big. They make mistakes, but those mistakes are theirs, not yours. He wiped his eyes. Dad messed up, didn't he? I shook my head. No child should judge a parent before they know the whole story. Your father made mistakes, yes. But the question isn't whether he failed. I cupped his cheek and looked him in the eyes. The question is whether he's willing to fix it. Noah swallowed. Do you think he is? I said softly, he's finally starting. He breathed out. The faintest, truest sigh of relief I'd heard in weeks. 8:20 p.m., Noah sleeps. After a cup of cocoa and the heat from the fireplace, Noah drifted off on the sofa. I covered him with a blanket and texted Martha. Noah is safe. He walked here alone. I'll bring him home. 2 minutes later, she called, voice shaking. Oh my God, is he okay? He's fine. Then came the question she'd been holding back. Albert, what are you planning to do with Logan now? Nothing. Nothing. Albert, you've already done too much. Not true, I said quietly. I've only let him face the consequences of what he did. Nothing more. Martha stayed silent. Then she whispered, do you think Logan still has a chance to come back from this? I looked at Noah. Peaceful, sleeping, trusting. Yes. A pause. Why? Because his son still believes in him. 9:45 p.m. driving Noah home. On the drive back to Reginald's house, Noah woke. Grandpa? Yes, Noah? Can I still visit you? Anytime. He leaned his head against the cold window, watching the snow tumble past the streetlights. Grandpa, if Dad fixes himself, will you forgive him? I didn't answer right away. Forgiving isn't the hard part, I finally said. The hard part is becoming someone who deserves forgiveness. Noah nodded, genuinely. I'll help, Dad. I smiled, not wide but real. You being Noah is more help than you know. Logan watches from the dark. When I pulled up to Reginald's driveway, Noah hugged me tight before running inside. What I didn't know, not until later, was that Logan was standing less than 2 blocks away, hidden behind a street lamp, watching Noah hug me, watching me rest my hand on Noah's shoulder, watching, but not stepping forward. If I had seen him, I still would have kept my distance. Some lessons collapse the moment a father steps in too early. If Logan watched me drive away, and I believe he did, I hope he understood one thing. I hadn't cut him out of my life. I was simply standing at the end of a very long road, waiting to see if he could walk far enough to reach me. I started the engine. The snow swallowed the rearview mirror. My headlights carved a narrow path through the white. And in that moment, barely above a whisper, I said to the quiet inside the car, the lesson is just beginning, Logan. If you choose right, this old man will be waiting for you at the end. Behind me, somewhere in the falling snow, my son stood with clenched fists, as if he had just recovered a piece of his soul he thought was gone forever. Chicago nights can cut you open if you're not careful, the kind of cold that slices through coats, gloves, and bone. But even that didn't compare to the cold inside a father. Watching his son fall farther than he ever imagined, and knowing he had to let him fall. For 7 nights straight, Logan worked the graveyard shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Every single night. His name, once printed on the wall of my company's downtown headquarters, now appeared on a laminated sheet near the service elevator under one simple label: custodial staff. And I knew all of it. Every shift change, every blister, every breath he took in those empty, echoing halls, every bruise to his pride. I let it happen, not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, but because there's one truth only an old father understands. A man cannot rebuild himself until he finally sees his own reflection in the dark. Logan takes a second job and I stay silent. The first week of January, I received a text from a building engineer I knew in the loop. Your son signed up for early morning snow shifts. Whatever you did, he's trying. I put my shovel down. Snow settled on my shoulders like white dust. I pictured Logan in the early dawn light, gripping a shovel with numb hands, breath white in the air, face hardened by the cold. When he was a kid, I used to wake him at sunrise to help shovel the driveway. He'd groan, complain, tug the blanket over his head. Now he was doing it alone, paid by the hour. No warmth, no praise. I wanted to call him, ask if he needed gloves, boots, a warm meal. I didn't. There are lessons a man can only learn when the snow bites his hands and no one is there to pull him upright. Court-ordered therapy, and I stay out of the room. I learned from Martha's attorney that the court required Logan to attend anger management sessions if he wanted the right to see Noah regularly. I sat for a long time after hearing that. Logan had once been such a gentle boy, afraid of stepping on ants in the driveway, crying when his mother was sick, a child who looked at the world with soft eyes. But on Christmas Eve, those soft eyes hardened into something else. I was told that, in the first therapy session, Dr. Patrice Holloway had told him, when a man pushes his father, it isn't just anger, it's the collapse of the self. I felt something break inside me when I heard that. Because she was right, and because I knew how much it must have hurt him to hear it. But I didn't interfere. Therapy was a room I couldn't enter, even as his father, especially as his father. Some wounds a man must expose to a stranger before he can ever face them with the people he loves. He pays child support, and Noah tells me first. That afternoon, Noah visited me. The boy slipped into my living room the way children do when they're carrying something too big for their shoulders. He opened his backpack and pulled out a math book. Grandpa, Dad bought this for me. I didn't ask how Logan found the money. Didn't ask if it left him short for his own meals. I only nodded and said, "Good. Your dad is trying." Noah gave a small, shy smile. And for the first time in weeks, hope walked into my house. Logan hears a truth about Reginald, and I know instantly. January 7th. I was clearing the walkway in front of my house when my phone rang. It was an old friend, the chief engineer of Marlowe Engineering. "Albert, I think you should know something. Logan overheard a conversation last night. It changed him." My hands tightened around the shovel. What did he hear? Two managers had been whispering about Reginald Draper, Logan's father-in-law, the man Logan once idolized, the man who pretended to mentor him. They said Draper has a long history of dividing families so he can buy companies cheap. My friend continued. "And they mentioned your family. They mentioned Logan." I froze. Cold wind rushed down my collar, but I didn't feel it. I knew immediately what it meant. Logan had discovered the truth. Reginald never cared for him, never viewed him as a son, never planned to build anything with him. To Draper, Logan was a pawn, a tool, a crack in the door he could widen to get to me. And to Stratford Construction, my friend added softly, "He heard everything, Albert. And I think he's waking up." I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to go to Logan right that moment. Hold him. Tell him he wasn't alone. Tell him he wasn't the first man manipulated by someone he trusted. But I didn't. I only said, "Thank you. Tell him I know." Facing betrayal alone, a pain he needed to feel. Late that night, I sat alone in my office. Snow drifted quietly past the window. Every roof on the block had turned white, peaceful, untouched. Somewhere across the city, my son sat in the break room of a building that didn't belong to him, with a beat-up laptop, shaking hands, a jaw clenched in shock. He was reading emails, reading messages, reading the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. Emails between Martha and Reginald. "Albert is old-fashioned. He's holding the company back. Logan deserves more than living under his father's shadow. A divided family is an opportunity." And maybe the worst of it, Reginald pushing Martha to undermine Logan's relationship with me. Long before Christmas Eve, I pictured Logan leaning back in a plastic chair, breath gone, heart pounding, as the truth carved him open. He had helped the wrong man. He had betrayed the right one. And now, he had to face that alone. He begins documenting everything. and someone tells me, around 1 a.m., I got a text from a night security guard I knew. Your son has been writing for 2 hours straight. Emails. Notes. Everything Draper did. Everything he said. Logan's trying to put the pieces back together. I sat down in my own chair and gripped the armrest. Not out of anger. Not out of triumph. It felt like watching a candle flare to life, in the darkest part of a long tunnel, the exact tunnel I feared my son might never escape. By the end of the night, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Hope. Not loud. Not dramatic. Not warm. Just a thin thread of it. Fragile but real. As the snow kept falling outside my window, I closed my eyes and heard Logan's voice. Not the voice of the man who pushed me, but the voice of the boy he once was. The boy who used to run through the backyard barefoot. The boy who once said, "Dad, I just want to do things right." And in my heart it felt like he was saying now, "Dad, I know everything. I know who pulled me away from you. But I'm walking back. On my own." I whispered into the quiet. "Good. Keep walking, Logan. I'm here, but not where you left me. I'm waiting at the end of the road. You must choose to take." Chicago was silent that night. But beneath that silence, I heard something new, something I hadn't heard in a long, long time. Hope. The 12th of January 2025. Chicago was entering the coldest stretch of the winter. Wind from Lake Michigan cut through the streets like sharpened blades, slicing through coats and scarves and leaving people hunched over, moving fast, as if they were trying to outrun something. But I knew one thing. There are chills in this world colder than any winter wind. Colder than the Chicago nights when I watched my son fade into the dark corners of his own life. There was a different storm gathering now. Quiet, invisible, but deadly to any man who built his empire on manipulation. A corporate ethics probe was circling around Reginald Draper. Not the SEC, not the FBI, not the press, but in the world of business, it's the softest tap on the table that tells you the hammer is coming. That evening, while I was adding another log to the fire, my phone rang. A friend from the corporate circuit, someone who owed me nothing but respect, said, "Albert, your son heard everything." I stopped what I was doing. He told me Logan had overheard 2 senior managers on the 62nd floor of Willis Tower. Draper pushed the Sanderson family into debt to take over their company. He's under cross-review for 2 acquisitions. He has a playbook. Divide a family, then seize the business. And then the sentence that made my chest tighten. Logan was just a pawn to bring Albert down. Not because I was personally wounded by it, but because I knew Logan finally would see the truth. He'd see how he'd been used, how his pride had been baited, how his insecurities had been sharpened into weapons, how he'd been guided, nudged, pushed, right into the worst mistake of his life. My friend added quietly. He sat down when he heard it. Hard, hands shaking. "I think he's waking up." I closed my eyes. For a moment, everything in me wanted to run to him. Hold him. Tell him, "Son, I know." I always knew. But I didn't. Because this lesson, the hardest one, he had to swallow himself. The next day, Logan comes clean to Martha. I wasn't there, but I heard it from someone who was. Logan went to Martha. He didn't blame her. He didn't yell. He didn't make excuses. He placed a thick notebook on the counter, filled with his handwritten notes, copied emails, timelines, patterns of manipulation. He admitted what he did. He admitted who influenced him. He admitted the part he played. That was the moment I knew. My son had finally looked in the mirror and recognized the man staring back. And that is always where redemption begins. January 14th, the park confrontation. That afternoon, I took my usual walk through Lincoln Park. The world was white, quiet, and brittle. Snow landed on my coat and hair, as if trying to turn me into part of the scenery. When I reached an empty patch of frozen grass, I saw a figure standing alone. Black overcoat, gray scarf, Italian shoes shining even in the snow. I recognized him instantly. Reginald Draper. His face looked smaller than I remembered, his posture less certain. "Albert," he said. "Reginald." We faced each other. 2 old men in the wind, with nothing but honesty left to trade. "I owe you something," he said. I'm listening, and he admitted it piece by piece. He underestimated me. He groomed Logan. He preyed on Martha's insecurities. He fueled Logan's desire to step out of my shadow. He used my family as leverage. When he said, "I regret it," I didn't believe all of it. But I heard something rare in his voice. Truth. "I'm not interested in your apology," I told him. "I'm interested in my son." He nodded and said he had already informed the ethics committee that Logan had been manipulated, that Logan wasn't the architect of anything, only the instrument. It didn't erase Logan's guilt, but it shifted the weight of the knife. Then, surprisingly, Draper offered to partner on the Snowbound Scholarship Fund, a program for underprivileged kids. I agreed, not for his sake, not for forgiveness, but because children deserve chances that men like us failed to give our own. Still, I looked him in the eye and said, "The damage you caused leaves scars." Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, but I knew he stayed in that spot a long time, defeated not by money, not by power, but by character. Logan sees us and sees the truth. What I didn't know then was that Logan was there too, hidden behind the trees, watching Draper lower his head, watching me stand my ground not with revenge, not with rage, but with steadiness. He didn't hear our words, but he saw enough. He saw that I did not crumble, that I did not beg, that I did not bow, that I faced the man who twisted him with dignity, and that realization broke him because he finally understood something. He hadn't lost his place in my life because I pushed him away. He lost it because he walked toward the wrong man. That night, preparing for the final lesson, I came home, sat at my desk, opened the draft of the Snowbound Scholarship Foundation. 2 photographs lay in front of me. Rose, my wife, the woman who taught me kindness, has edges sharper than knives, and Logan at age 10, grinning over the wooden toy car I carved for him. I stared at those faces for a long time. Then I whispered, "Logan, you've wandered far. It's time to walk yourself back. Not with money, not with titles, not with apologies spoken too easily. With work, with time, with backbone. I don't want revenge. I don't need punishment. I want my son to reclaim the name Winslow and make it mean something." I turned off the lamp. Snow fell outside like soft reminders of every mistake we ever made. And into that quiet night, I said, "Get ready, son. The next chapter is waiting, and only you can step into it." Summer of 2025. Chicago burned under a heat that felt unreal. A thick, sticky heat that clung to the skin, as if the entire city had been set atop a massive iron skillet. And I, a 6-7-year-old man, stood on my back porch, watching the sun scorch the lawn into brittle gold, feeling another kind of heat dissolve inside my chest. 7 months. 7 months since that Christmas night. The night my son, the boy I once carried in my arms, pushed me to the floor over a chair meant for his father-in-law. 7 months since I closed the door to my heart, not out of bitterness, but because Logan needed a lesson no lecture could ever teach. And for 7 months, I watched from the quiet shadows as he learned it. No man grows in the light. A man grows only in the dark, where no one applauds, no one validates, and all he hears is the sound of his own breath. At the end of a long day, Logan had walked straight into that darkness, and for the first time in years, he stayed. A different man, nothing like the Logan I once knew. Hernandez, Logan's night shift supervisor, told me first. Logan had rented a tiny apartment in Cicero. 1 bedroom, gray walls, a $40 second-hand table, a Goodwill poster of the Chicago skyline. But what made me stop moving entirely was what Hernandez said next. He only put up photos of Noah, nothing else. A man who decorates his home only with pictures of his child is a man relearning how to live. I learned Logan was working 2 jobs, janitorial nights, and morning shifts hauling lumber for a remodeling crew. No one forced him. No one pushed him into survival mode. He chose it. And that, for the first time in many years, was the right choice. The men's accountability group, where he finally said the truth. One night, my phone buzzed. Mr. Winslow, Logan's at the men's accountability group. He talked about you. I sat down. Hernandez sent me a note he'd copied. I hurt my father. No one made me do it. I did it myself. I read that line over and over again. It didn't feel like relief. It felt like pain, but healing pain. Logan had finally looked in the mirror and recognized himself. He's offered a second chance, not because of me, but because of him. A remodeling contractor, a friend of mine, called. Albert, I met your boy today. He's different now. Not the arrogant CEO type anymore. I gave him a shot as a tech assistant. I didn't speak for nearly half a minute. That chance came not from family name, not from my influence, but because Logan showed a trace of character that couldn't be faked. He had earned it. Logan writes to me. But I don't write back. Every month, from February to July, a letter arrived. Each one said the same thing. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm rebuilding myself from the ground up. No excuse. No deflections. No blame. I read every letter, placed them gently inside Rose's old wooden box, and answered none. Not because I was cold, but because forgiveness too early kills a man's growth. Logan needed to learn to stand, without my hand pulling him up. Logan confronts Reginald and stands taller than I expected. I wasn't in the room on the 12th floor of Draper Holdings that night, but word travels. Logan arrived on time. Draper invited him to sit. Logan refused. Draper apologized. Logan didn't melt. Draper tried to regain control and couldn't. But what made my knees weaken was the sentence Logan delivered. You only won when I didn't know how to stand up. That was the voice of a man, finally reclaimed from manipulation. When Logan stood tall, Draper lost all his power. Martha sees the truth, and something broken begins to mend. Martha called that night. Her voice trembled. Mr. Winslow. I read Logan's notebook. I understand now. There was shame in her tone, and pain, and awakening. I let myself be manipulated, she whispered. I believed the one lie I feared most, that you looked down on me. I didn't blame her. Draper didn't only manipulate Logan. He targeted Martha's deepest insecurities, the oldest trick of small men hungry for power, finding a crack, and prying a whole family open. Noah speaks and says what none of us adults dared say. Martha told me Noah stepped between the two of them and asked, Dad, do you really want to be a good person? When Logan said yes, Noah added, if you and Grandpa are both trying, why can't grown-ups talk like me and my friends do? I sat in silence after hearing that. Sometimes, children see truth, long before adults can. Logan meets me at last and I give him the final test. 2 Augustus 2025. I ask Logan to come to my backyard. No hugs, no handshake, no dramatic reconciliation. I simply said, Son, I've read your letters. You've changed. He answered quietly, I haven't changed enough. I nodded. Humility, the genuine kind, is rare in grown men. I asked, do you want to return to Stratford Construction? He froze, then said, no, not unless I deserve it. And right now, I don't. That answer was the one I'd been waiting for years. I set my teacup down and said, I have a project, not corporate, a community rebuild for veterans. Hard, physical, demanding discipline. Logan swallowed. I continued, I won't supervise. I won't rescue. I won't protect you. You prove who you are. Logan's voice cracked, but his eyes held steady. I'll do it. I won't quit. I said softly, don't do it for me. Do it for Noah. Then finally, I reached out my hand. Logan stared at it a long time, as if it was the doorway back home. He took it. A short handshake, but enough. Enough to begin a new chapter. One built not on titles, not on power, not on regret, but on two men, a father opening the door once more, and a son trying, truly trying, to become a man worthy of stepping through it. The 4th of December 2025. Chicago woke beneath a thin veil of powdery white snow. Soft, light, almost gentle. Not the biting wind of early winter. Not the bitter storms of last year. Just quiet, the kind of quiet that settles over a city when a year is ready to close, and a family story is ready to complete its final chapter. 1 year ago, my son Logan Stratford pushed me to the floor in the middle of Christmas dinner. 1 year ago, he lost everything a man needs to stand upright: his dignity, his marriage, his work, and the respect he once held for himself. Today, he was somewhere in Cicero, pulling a small wagon filled with gift bags, working with the Christmas giving program, wearing old gloves and a scarf a size too big. And I, his father, the man who watched him fall deeper than I ever imagined, stood in my quiet kitchen, listening to the kettle whistle, and thought, maybe, finally, he has found his way. Logan gives back the first sign of a real man. Noah told me later what he'd seen that morning, how Logan went door to door at the veterans' housing complex, placing gift bags outside each apartment, bowing his head as he whispered, "Merry Christmas, sir." He shook hands with an elderly veteran, a thin man with silver hair and a soft smile. "Thank you, son," the man said. "This Christmas feels a little lighter." A year ago, Logan would have called this a waste of time. He once said to me, "Helping people doesn't open any doors for my future." But now, he led the volunteer team himself, not because anyone told him to, not because he wanted praise, but because he'd finally realized a man's worth isn't measured by what he gets, but by what he gives. When Noah brought him a cup of hot chocolate, the boy said, "Mom, let me come today. She said you're doing good things, Dad." Noah smiled when he told me that part, and I nearly dropped my teacup. 1 year, and the world of that boy, and the world of my son, had quietly, beautifully begun to change. A quiet afternoon, just me and my grandson. Around noon, Noah came to my house as usual. For 8 months now, we'd kept this routine, without lawyers, without schedules, without formal agreements. Just a mutual understanding between me and Martha. Noah deserved all the love he could get, no matter what the adults had done. He placed a small pastry box on the table. "Grandpa, Dad and I helped deliver gifts. Dad said Christmas is for giving, not getting." My hand froze. "Your father said that?" "Yes. Some truths don't need to be checked. You can hear whether a man is lying by the weight of the words he chooses." I looked at a photo of Logan as a child, the boy smiling beside the wooden toy car I built for him. "You're a lot like your father," I told Noah. He grinned. "I hope I'm like the best part of him." I rested my hand on his head. "You already are." And inside me, something small and hard finally loosened. The letter I wasn't expecting. When Noah left with Logan, I walked outside to get the mail. A plain white envelope waited in the box. I knew whose handwriting it was. Before I even touched it, I carried it inside, poured fresh tea, and opened it slowly, like opening something fragile. Logan wrote, "Dad, this past year I walked through places I once looked down on. If you hadn't let me face the cost of my choices, I'd never have grown, never become the man Noah needs. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I only want you to know I'm grateful for the lesson you gave me. Merry Christmas. Logan." I read it once, twice, a third time. I didn't cry, but something inside me opened, carefully, cautiously, as if my heart feared moving too fast might undo everything Logan had built. I pulled open the drawer, took out Rose's old fountain pen, and began to write. "Logan, I read your letter. I'm proud you chose the hardest road, the road of looking inward. I promise nothing about the future. What broke cannot return unchanged. But know this, the man you are today is worthy of respect. Keep going, not for me, for yourself and for Noah. Dad." I folded it, sealed it, drove to the post office. Without hesitation, I knew Logan didn't expect a reply, and that is exactly why he deserved one. Snow fell thick the next morning. I heard footsteps. The door opened. Noah ran to Logan, wrapped his arms around him tight. "Dad, I missed you." Logan knelt, returning the hug with the gentleness of a man who had relearned how to touch his child without pride or shame. Martha stood at the doorway, She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply nodded. A nod that didn't mean forgiveness, but meant permission to step, carefully, back toward the light. Noah turned to Logan. Grandpa said you can eat with us tonight. It's not a big dinner, just something simple. Logan froze. I can sit at the table tonight? Grandpa said, if you want a seat, it isn't about going back. It's about starting new. I stood in the kitchen doorway, tea in hand. Logan lifted his head. Our eyes met. I didn't smile widely. I didn't reach out. But I nodded. A small nod. Enough to open a door. A simple meal and a quiet return. We ate chicken soup, warm bread, roasted potatoes. Nothing fancy. No wine. No decorations. No one mentioned last year's fall. No one brought up the investigation. No one spoke the word forgive. But healing often happens, not in grand gestures, but in small sounds. A softened voice. A shared glance. The clink of a spoon against a bowl. Our family was not what it once had been, but it was beginning to become what it needed to be. When Noah left the table, Logan stayed behind to clean up. I stepped forward, rested my hand on his shoulder, the first time in a year. You did well, I said. He didn't turn. His voice trembled. I won't disappoint you again. I squeezed his shoulder gently. Don't worry about disappointing me. Just don't disappoint yourself. Before sunrise, I stepped onto my porch, breath fogging in the cold. And there he was, Logan, in his old coat, hood up, gloves worn thin, shoveling snow, for the entire neighborhood, the very chore he once mocked me for, throughout his childhood. No cameras, no applause, no audience, just a man, doing the right thing, because it was right. At the end of the street, Noah came running. Dad, let me help. Logan smiled, a soft, peaceful smile I hadn't seen in many, many years. And in that moment, I knew the worst in our family story was behind us. Not because of loud revenge, not because of dramatic victories, but because of something quieter, a slow, patient rebuilding, and a return made with dignity. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and share to hear more real stories about family, humanity, and justice. Stories that remind us it's never too late to rebuild what matters.